Okay, so before we jump right into the modeling, what I want to do is I first want to go over a reference, then we'll set up Blender, and then we can just jump right in. So, for our reference, now I have quite a few reference images as you can see over here, although we will probably only use like a few of them. But basically here are a few. So this one will be one of our main ones. The reason that is because both we can see like the bottom side, which is pretty cool, and we can see a little bit of the rust buildup. But I will just cycle through it. So for this one, this is just like a basic one. Whenever I say a basic one, I mean one that we won't really use that much. I just have it here just for the sake of it. So this one is pretty good because we can have a clear view at how the connections work. So that's why I quite like this one. And I also like this because I quite like this panel and just the way that the side looks. So we will use this one mostly for the side and probably also for like these brackets over here, because they also look quite cool. For the rest, we have this one. This one we will use to create, like, because we are going to go for like a round frame. That's just something I decided. If you want, you can go for like a square. I just find because everything is already square, all of a sudden having something round in there just gives us a more interesting look. This is just some Rust reference. This one is just basic. This one basic. Basically how I go about this is, in this case I just go to Google Images. I literally type in air conditioning and I just keep dragging in a lot of stuff that whatever I find interesting. So there is no real science to it. It's just me randomly dragging in something that I find even remotely interesting. So this one we will probably also not use a lot. Also basic. This one, it does give like a cool view of like the colors, of just having like this dull white grayish color, which I quite like. This one is another one where it's very good for us to just see like the connectors over here. And also I quite like the reference where you have like multiple cables going into the console and then like going around the back. Let's see, what else do we have? Monkeys, fun. But it actually is also a good reference just to see like some of the color and just see like how the blades work and how it would look like when we have a round piece over here. And of course, monkeys, why not? So another one. Ooh, this one is actually really nice. Now we will not do the plastic like this. We will go for more of like a variation where we have one bare cable and one cable that has like a foil around it. I think I've seen that here somewhere. Let's have a look. This is good because it shows the bottom side a lot better. Do remember this is inverted, but for the rest, it does show the bottom side. Oh yeah, here. This is where I saw that. So it's like this foil type of material that we will just wrap around it. So I think that will look quite nice. Let's see. Another one for the bottom side. Another one just to see like the rust buildup, which I think is quite nice. We will not have like anything broken like this, but we do want to have like some nice rust buildup here and there. Another basic one. Here's just a very close look at how the blades would look. So I think that is also very important. We can even use this image to literally model one of our blades, and then it's just a matter of duplicating that one over and over again. Let's see. This one, I just like the color. And also just having like a logo here, I think that will look nice. Though we need to be careful with the logos because of copyright. Another one, just a good preview of like the blade and how rust eats away from the metal. Same over here, some rust reference, some dirt reference. This one's more color, so it shows us a good color for our rust, a good color for our base, and a good color for like the, just having like some extra variation in here with the yellow. And of course, for the rest, yeah, it just shows the blades and also some nice material definition. So that was it. I went through this quite quickly because a lot of these we won't actually use, or we will only like use once. But of course, when we start modeling, that's when we will just really go in here and we'll just keep, I will keep bringing up this reference and just show you how we will go about this. For the rest, the shape is fairly easy. The difficult parts are the base probably. They are the blades over here and the connectors with the cables down here. For the rest, everything is pretty straightforward, so it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm going to have probably this one open. We will make a slightly thinner one, but let's use this as a base. And what we can do now is we can now go ahead and we can jump into Blender, where I will show you the setup of our plugins that we are going to use, or at least that I'm using. All the plugins you don't have to use, you can do this with the base Blender. I just like the plugins to make my life a bit easier. So let's continue with that by going into Blender. So in your source files you have this folder which is called Blender. And in here you can find a few plugins and you can find a keyboard shortcut. Now the first one is BS Max. BS Max is basically a plugin that will make the workings of Blender, with that I mean the moving around and the selecting. If I just go here, so it will make it look very similar to, for example, 3ds Max, although you can also set it to Maya or anything. Very easy. If you know the default of Blender and you're comfortable with that, you can simply use that. But if you are an artist and you use Maya, for example, or you use 3ds Max, like I do, it's very annoying that you need to keep switching between the different programs. So for example, in my professional life, I use 3ds Max most of the time, and also Maya. Now, if I, for every single tutorial, need to keep switching to Blender, which is very similar, but not quite the same, what will happen is that I would need like a half hour to an hour warm up every single time that I open up Blender, just to get everything to work correctly the way I want it to. And that's where this plugin comes in. The only thing that this plugin basically does for me, that I've set it on, is that I use my middle mouse button for panning, Alt middle mouse button for rotating, and for the rest just my scroll wheel for zooming in. And then I use W, E and R just to switch between move, rotate and scale. And for the rest, if we go to edit mode, I use 1 for vertices, 2 for edges, 3 for faces, and 4 is select linked, but I will go over that later on. And that's pretty much about it. So that is the one that I use. Once again, you don't need it to follow this tutorial course if you are, because this tutorial course is for intermediates, so I do expect that you already know a base of Blender anyway. We have my keyboard shortcuts. Because this tool shifts some stuff around, I have set up some own shortcuts just to make my life a lot easier. I will go over those shortcuts after I've finished explaining this. So we have the Maxivis tools. The Maxivis tools are awesome. We will also be using them. Basically you have them down here near the side. And they are just like a bunch of tools that are very familiar to 3ds Max users, but that you simply are annoying to do inside of Blender. Now, there are only a few ones that we use. I like to use the wireframe toggle over here instead of going down here and pressing wireframe. It's just like slightly quicker. I like to use the edit pivot, which allows me to very quickly change my pivot position. And quick pivot, which very quickly allows me to snap it back to the center. And I like to use target while toggle, which basically all it does is it's turning on snapping with vertex to the closest using move. And then up here, it is turning on the auto merge. So imagine that without this button, I would need to keep switching between those two constantly every time I want to do this. And basically all it does is when you move one vertex to another, it will automatically snap to that vertex and merge it together to turn it into one single vertex. Those are the most ones that I use for this. I recommend that you just have like a look at this. It's a really cool tool. No harm in installing it. And the Shure UV we only use once, but I did include it in here. Basically it's just automatic unwrapping. So what it does is when you press UV box map, it will just create a UV unwrap in the shape of a box just to do some automatic unwrapping. But I will go over that one in detail in the tutorial. There is nothing to this. It's literally pressing a button. So, very quickly, if you want to install these, and then I will go over things in detail. You can go to Edit and Preferences, and in the add-ons you can press Install and you can simply navigate to the zip files. You don't need to extract them, you can just select the zip files. And for our key map, you just need to press Import and navigate to the keyboard. Now I of course already have them installed, but that's about it for this. So, very quickly, let's go to Preferences and add-ons. In the BS Max, you can even install it if you want to, and even if you're not going to use it. Because in here you can set your preferences. So I can choose which type of navigation I want. So I set my navigation to 3ds Max. I set my key map to 3ds Max. And I set my tool spec to 3ds Max. For the rest, everything is still Blender. So there's very little difference. Now in here I have a few shortcuts that are slightly different that you will hear me calling out. The first one is Alt X. Alt X is for me X-ray. It's the same as pressing this button over here. I just set this to Alt X. Now any shortcuts that you want to set, you can go to Preferences, Key Map, and here you can for example type in X-ray and then toggle X-ray. You can just click and select whatever button you want. So that's how you do shortcuts. So the next one that I had is Select Linked. Basically what I like to do is if I select a face, I want to be able to press 4, which I did, to select Linked, which will basically select everything that is attached to that face. If you're a 3ds Max or Maya user, you can see this as Element Select or Object Select inside your edit mode. Now you can very easily go to Select up here and select select Linked, and then here you have Linked. So that is simply the button that is assigned to the shortcut 4. Now for these things you can either right click and you can press Assign Shortcut over here, and that will do the same thing. And for the rest I have, instead of E, so E is extrude for you guys if you use default Blender, but because we use W, E and R to rotate, move and scale, I have Shift E as extrude. That's it. And one last shortcut that I have is I have Ctrl R, which basically allows me to place a loop. Now why is this different? So yes, you can go up in over here and you have the loop cut, which does allow you to place a loop. However, Ctrl R is way more. Ctrl R allows you to place a loop. It allows you to use your scroll wheel to add more or less loops. And once you place it, you can just move it around and change it like that. The reason why this is set to Ctrl R is because there is actually no button for it. For some reason, they just didn't bother adding this into the UI. So there's no existing button anywhere in here. You need to go to Edit, Preferences and Key Map. And it is called Loop, Cut and Slide under Mesh. So Ctrl R. So that's the one that you want to set to Ctrl R. And that is also the one that I couldn't find it, at least. I tried, I even looked online and everything. I couldn't find this one mesh. So that is it for the shortcuts. Now, one last thing that I want to show you is the quick favorites. I'm sure that you're familiar with it, but I just want to show you what's in my quick favorites. So if I press Q, I go to my quick favorites. Once again, I think I set this to a separate one. So in window, just set this to whatever you want. I set mine to Q because quick as in Q. Quick favorites is basically your own personal menu. What this menu does is it allows you, if you use functions very often, so let's go to edit mode, it allows you to very quickly be able to select these functions so that you do not need to go all the way up here and then, for example, select whatever you want. So I will go in the tutorial, I will go in depth over what every function that we use does, but just very quickly, because there are some that we use a lot. In object mode, if you press Q, you can see all transforms. What this is, it is object, apply, all transforms. And basically what it does is it resets all these transforms over here, which often helps in debugging or fixing any problems. Because after a while, when you are modeling and you're adding a lot of changes to your model, the transforms can get a little bit confused, which causes your functions to work incorrectly. But that's something that you will see in practice in the tutorial. In edit mode, we have extrude faces along normals, which basically is if you press extrude like this, it doesn't really know which way to go. Oh, sorry, let's do it with 3. Here, it doesn't really know which way to extrude. So if you go to face, extrude face along normal, and you can just right click and you can press add to quick favorites over here. That's how you add things. Basically what that does is it will just extrude it based upon the direction of every single face. And it will try to extrude it as good as it can. It is also very handy for stuff like this, where you have them on both sides. You can extrude it like this. We have fill. So the fill is simply if you, for example, have an empty face. So I deleted this face. You can go to edges and fill over here. And basically all that does is it will just fill this face. New face new edge face from vertices is almost the same as fill, except that it allows to add a blank face instead of with fill you get like a little edge in between. So I use this one the most. You can also find this one in, let's see, here, vertex, new edge face from vertices. So that's where you can find that one. At center and by distance, those two are basically, if you select two vertices, you can merge them at the center of the two. Or if you select by distance, you can merge vertices, whatever is selected, as long as they are closer than a given distance down here together. So if I set this really high, you can see that it's trying to merge it. You can find these in mesh. Sorry, not mesh. Where I always get lost of these. I think it was in mesh. Merge. Here. Mesh, merge, at center, and by distance. Selection is simply if you have something selected, you can press separate selection over here. And that one simply separates it as a separate object. Once again, you can find this one in face, let's see, mesh, separate and selection over here. And lastly, we have the bridge edge loops, which I'm sure everyone knows. It's simply if you have an empty face, you can select two edges and you can press Q, bridge edge loops. That's weird. Oh, it's probably because we merged, sorry. Shift A, mesh, let's create a clean cube. Wow, I can't speak. Don't worry, I can definitely speak in the rest of the tutorial course. So you select these, Q and bridge edge loops. You can find these also in edge and bridge edge loops. So that was it. I went over this very quickly also because I want to keep this tutorial or this part very short. Because we go over everything in so much detail in the next few chapters. So I didn't want to bother you with like double or triple times saying the exact same thing. But that is my setup. And now what we have is we have a reference we went over. We went over our plugins that we have that you can find in your source files. And just a quick favorites menu and my personal shortcuts. So with all of this, you are ready to get started with the tutorial course. And we will go over everything in detail, and it's going to be a really fun and exciting tutorial course. So let's go ahead and let's get started.